Well, welcome, disciples. This is the crazy youth leaders. You thought youth were a handful. We just demonstrated for the past half hour how indeed we are a force to reckon with in fun and fellowship and just collegiality. And we are presenting this part here with this is the crux of why we are gathering tonight to learn from one of our partners in ministry, one of our colleagues who does this as her ministry on a wider church level. And she is Cindy Berkner, and she and I have been doing youth stuff for, do you remember the first year when we began, Cindy? It was,
Oh my gosh, I think Joel was a sophomore, maybe, so a long time ago.
yeah, so at least maybe 2009, 2008, 2010,
Yeah.
something like that, for 10 years, certainly. And that's when I was a local pastor serving a UCC congregation. And we found out others who were very passionate about youth ministry. So dove right in, and Cindy and I co-directed, along with other fantastic youth ministers, what's called the Conference Youth Event, which is kind of like our Cry Festival that we had, except it was weekend long, usually over President's Day. But we had a theme and keynoters and lots of fun and games and workshops, all in kind of 3 or 4 days that were there. And Cindy has an incredible gift that is passionate with youth, that she exercised that for many years as the youth minister at St. John UCC in St. Charles, and a substantial congregation and substantial youth group. And they did many wonderful things. They had 2 youth buses. Can you imagine that, to take to all the places, and did mission trips, and always wants to find new ways of connecting. And then now with the Missouri Mid-South Conference, she coordinates youth ministry on a conference-wide level. And part of how she does that is bring youth leaders and youth pastors together for a monthly Zoom conversation. You can be in person or Zoom there to share resources and ideas and kind of what's going on, and to plan for upcoming events. But she's also a resource person who will go to a congregation or go to a cluster or region to talk about serious stuff, serious topics that pastors need to know regarding lives of youth, such as teen suicide and vaping and bullying, and you name it. It's I'm sure each of us have experienced some of that. So she's just going to share some of her story and some of the ideas as we are, as disciples, we're just beginning our collaboration, our unity together, and toward the end we'll kind of make some action plans of how we want to continue conversations and pulling resources and strengths, and creating some cooperative events, perhaps all year long. Zane will comment, but we realize that the summers keep getting shorter with summer school, not just making up for classes that you failed, but for a chance to take advanced classes and other interesting topics. Some school districts take those all the way through the middle of June, third week of June. So that wipes out many congregations for starting summer camps first part of June. And then, of course, football and band and all that creeps up earlier and earlier. So it's a very finite window. So as everything, we use that as opportunity to say, what can we do with that in mind, and perhaps moving toward year-long youth activities, which I'm sure we've done many times in the past, special events over Christmas and Martin Luther King and Thanksgiving and other places. But we'll get to that in our planning. So right now, welcome, Cindy, and so glad that you're with us.
Oh my
Your
goodness,
honorary
thank you.
disciple.
I appreciate that. I don't think we're all that far apart anyway. I know a few disciples of Christ people. Well, I'm so glad to be here. I'm sorry we couldn't be in person, but I'm very excited to share what we do. And I could talk about youth ministry for a long time. So I've tried to compile it, because when you love something this much, it's hard. I know you guys know that. That's why you're here, and that's why you do what you do. But I will tell you, if you would have known me probably 25 years ago, you would never picture me in this role. I stumbled into it. I did not grow up going to camp. My first time at high school camp was when I directed it. I had with Leah Belinsky, if anybody knows Atkinson Belinsky, she introduced me to that, and CYU with Paul. I had never been into a youth group discussion until I led them. so I kind of flew by the seat of my pants. I didn't grow up with it. I fell in love with it and wanted to be a part of it. And I think that kind of started at my home church. I felt kind of obligated to go into the nursery when my children were little. I have 3 kids pretty close together in age. And I didn't care for it because I was like, I watch my kids at home. So I bumped over to the toddler room, and I realized that I was asking, without even realizing it, these little toddlers and preschoolers to tell me how they saw God and ask them to color it. And then I would be disappointed that it wasn't profound. And I realized I'm probably not cut out for the teeny weeny ones. So then I could hear these, what we called the 5th and 6th graders across the hall, and I wanted to be there. So one day I walked over and said, can I just join you? Can I be I'm sorry, it was 6th and 7th grade teacher? And they said, sure. So no training, threw me in. I got the book and I self-taught myself every week. I had never heard of the prodigal son. I had never, I didn't know all those Bible stories. I grew up Baptist, so we only did a lot of fire and brimstone, not real life stories, and or at least where I was. And then I fell in love with that. And I probably did that for 5-6 years as a volunteer. And then I went to a confirmation service, and I was sold. And I went to them then and said, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. And I knew then I belonged there. And I did that for 10 years. I was a confirmation teacher, and we really grew that program. And then because of that, I did that on Sundays, and I did high school small groups on Wednesdays, and I did mission trips every summer for many, many years. I've been on probably 27 mission trips. I'm passionate about mission. And then our youth director turned in her notice, and she left. And I applied, and I was so afraid because I was like, what if I get turned down for this job that I think I need, and they need me to be a part of? And I was hired there. And so I did that for 6 years. And then I decided it was time to leave. I kind of was getting burnt out on the church life of, church is church on Sundays, and then it's a lot of politics behind the scenes. And that started to hurt my heart a little bit, not anyone's fault. And then I realized it was time to walk away. But at that exact same time is when the Youth Covenanted Ministry team was building this position. And I was actually even on the planning team that was helping. I think, Paul, you were on part of it too. We were planning what this position would look like. And no one was applying. I think we had it out for a year or 9 months, and no one was applying. So I went to Jenny Brown Daniel at the time and said, I'm leaving here. Would you consider me for that? And we talked about it at length, and I was hired to do this job. And it has grown because what we designed it as was always fluid, what we had. So I kind of wanted to go into a little bit of what I do. I think that's what I'm supposed to be doing, is to telling you how we handle all of this together in the conference. And I don't have anything in an order, because literally there is no order to what I do. Some days you concentrate on this, some days you throw it out and you move to this. So these are random. These are not in order of importance to me. But I will tell you that COVID messed up everything. I know, Zane, you know that more than anybody. I went through a grieving process, like a huge toddler grieving process when they closed camp. That's my thing. When we couldn't do our retreats, I think I threw things. I think I cried. I think I spoke foul to more people than I should have. I was very sad. So COVID changed things to where I used to go out and travel to different churches, even if they didn't have youth, because they wanted at the time my face and my name to be out in front of everybody to warrant paying this position. And I would just travel on Sunday.
Maybe it was the fire and brimstone remark. Oh. Oh, that's a long little interruption break. Maybe she'll try to come back in. Well, while we're waiting for her to pop back in after she is finished, was gonna see who has interests in particular interest groups. I don't know if we need to divide tonight because there's 6 or 7 of us, but eventually just looking for what areas that you want to explore deeper. And I just made just kind of a list that I know Cindy dealt with and things that interest me, and then I've heard from pastors issues such as bullying, vaping, gaming, environment, teen suicide, self-harming, like cutting, justice issues, radical inclusion, and issues youth are passionate about. So that's kind of topic oriented ways that we can be resources to other congregations whose youth are dealing with those things. Here we come. But you're muted. Oh, okay.
My hotspot, which is part of what I was going to tell you. I knew nothing about electronics until COVID hit. I had to go and learn so much more, like how to use a hotspot from my phone. Anyway, so that's what happened. I had to learn how to do, like, I led worship services online. I had never done anything like that before. I started doing devotions. I led many rooms, which I'll kind of get to some of that. But I had to learn technology, and I also learned that in one Sunday I could go to 3 different churches and take part in their programming. And so I could grow my ministry this way, which is not the way I thought it would happen. But here are some things that I do. One of the first things I did was I built a website, and because I am not tech savvy, it's bare bones website, but it's very user friendly, and it's for all of the youth directors and leaders in the conference to go and look. I have resources on there, like tons and tons of discussion questions to keep in your folder in case you run out of things to talk about. I have things like mission trip ideas, local mission work for the Western and Eastern and St. Louis Association of our conference. I have forms that they can download and use if they're in a, if they're a small church and they don't have certain forms or know what to do. I've got examples of those that they can use, and we use that to show what upcoming events are going to be. They could go on that, more so back in the day when we were actually having them. So that's kind of empty right now, but you could go to that and download the form to register, and everything in one place was ideally what they could get there. And then what I realized I fell in love with, somebody who was really quite shy being videoed, was I fell in love with making devotions every week. And so I would do them myself. I'd set up my phone on a little tripod and do devotions. And then I decided, like during Lent and Advent, that we could get youth and youth leaders and pastors from all over the conference to do devotions. So this past Advent, we had different youth and their parents and people like that do music, some sort of Christmas or holiday song. And that became our weekly devotion of Advent, so that we could introduce talent in all the other churches across the conference. And that went really well. And then we did kind of the same thing for Lent, only we did more personal journeys of, I actually can't remember what I called it, but it was something where it was more of a personal journey with Christ to the cross. And so we asked people a prompt. And then I took on, which I think it went better than I thought, I decided to do devotions for ordinary time. Ordinary time, you do ordinary time, right? So it's super, super long, like a long, long time. And so I had this idea, like, oh, I'm going to get a different person to speak every single week. And the prompt was, where do you see God in the ordinary days of your life? Because you're not spoon fed through Lent and Christmas all of these images of God. So where do you find God? And I have been so lucky. I have had people from the wider church. I've had people from other religious backgrounds. I've had youth. I've had young adults. I've had pastors and youth directors every week share a devotion on where they see God. And I just have like 5 more to get. And I'm impressed that I had that many people volunteer. So if any of you guys are dying to do one, let me know. I have space. I'll share you. And then as I am concluding that, now I'm looking to do a devotional series during Advent, like a video bundle to share with churches to use, because not all the churches have resources to do their own. So I'm working towards that once this is over. We have a youth covenanted ministry team, like Paul said, and we meet once a month. It's the first Thursday of the month. We have not met in person since COVID. We found out that Zoom is not that bad. So we've decided, I think we will meet maybe 4 times a year in person. Other than that, we're just going to keep it on Zoom. More people can attend. And there we just talk about what's going on in the lives of our church, how we can help each other, how we can do wider conference events where we plan some of the events that Paul was talking about. We've been together for years, and so it's a great community. I also send out a weekly newsletter. This is new because of COVID, that I go to so many webinars and so many Zooms, and I read so many articles, and I belong to dozens of Facebook groups for youth ministry, that I just literally sit and do research each week on what I think the churches could use. And it's situational. Like, like right now I'm looking towards what people could do for fall. Before this, it was, how are you going to start programming? Maybe I might do research on Advent opportunities or things like that. It always fits where we are in the calendar year and the research. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 pages. Sometimes it's not. And that's where I said I started kind of dipping my toes in children's ministry, because I was finding that there were so many. I was finding a lot of children's books recommended and children's stories and things like that, and gift boxes for kids. And I shared those on there as well, because we don't have a children's director for the conference. So we decided, while I'll probably never work with children, I can still offer help and resources where that's needed. Let's see. I occasionally still will attend it, like when, well, let me start back. Before COVID, I did a confirmation retreat where I used to do it at my home church. And then when I took this job, I would offer a retreat for any church that was about to have confirmation. You guys don't do confirmation, is that right? You're muted, Paul.
We call it pastor's class. It's usually preparing leading up to Easter or Palm Sunday. It's
Okay.
much shorter than confirmation, typically like 7 or 8 weeks, 9 weeks for preparation of baptism at that time.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, I would offer this retreat, and then for the churches that would come, I would try to make it a point that I would personally attend their rite of confirmation service, because I think that's part of the community we're trying to build, is that if I was going to start the program with them, I wanted to be in the end of that. So that became very important. And I was able to still do that online, to go to, if a youth-led worship service, even though they didn't physically see me there, I would go online and then try to follow up. So building community with them is important to me, that they know that I'm part of their lives too. Then, like Paul said, it's so important to stay on top of what is happening with youth. And sometimes pastors and youth directors are so busy that we run into something that we have to all of a sudden halt everything else that we're doing and concentrate on this thing. And so just some examples, the jeweling. We discovered at high school camp and CYE that kids were jeweling, and it's very easy. Jeweling is the same as vaping. It's very easy to get away with, because some of it doesn't have an odor. The smell, the cloud goes away quicker. It's easy to compact it. And we were finding out that they were doing it, but we couldn't catch them. And then we also realized that in our covenants, we didn't have that covered. So we kind of put a halt on right before our camp ministry started up. And we encourage the churches to do the same thing for lock-ins and their own events, is to put jeweling in that covenant so that we could cover ourselves and say, this is not allowed here. And if you do, we'll send you home. So that was one thing that we called it a halt of things. And we got the word out to the pastors, and so many of them hadn't even heard of juuling at the time. I mean, we stumble over these things, and it's a lot of times because we have children of our own as well, which is at the time I did. Another thing, which was kind of eye-opening to me, which spilled over into this young adult ministry I'll go into in a little bit, is that about 4 years ago, I had some girls that grew up in my youth group at church call me at Christmas time. So first semester of their freshman year, they called me and wanted to meet me for coffee. And so I met them, and they said, "You didn't prepare us for college ministry. You didn't tell us enough." They said that they didn't know enough about Satan. They didn't know enough about the prospect of going to hell, that we didn't talk about mortal sin or a lot of sin in general. You know, we were all, God is loving and forgiving and love everybody and the world is great. And we thought that was the right way to teach. And then they go into campus ministry where they are told that sinning is looking at a boy with lust in the classroom. I never told them that they found out from this campus ministry that sinning is looking in the mirror and not loving what you see. If you see fat or if you see ugly, then that's a sin and you're going to go to hell. And this devastated these girls. And so I realized we didn't prepare them. They weren't wrong. So we halted what we were doing. I went out into the conference and held in our little association meetings, and we talked about how can we better lead high school youth to know what everybody else believes. They can understand it and be ready, because these girls said that they couldn't even hold their own in a group discussion because people would belittle them or laugh at their naive faith. And then they felt like they were really misled. And they blamed me, and I can't say that they're wrong. So we kind of met as pastors and youth directors and said, what can we do to make them feel more strong in their convictions, in their faith, where they can defend where they stand in the love of Christ and not feel the sin that is thrown at them, and be able to defend that in a healthy way, which is part of what the training became. So that was another halt. This is where we're throwing everything off. We're going towards this. Then another one that I'm very passionate about is talking about suicide prevention. And again, I have traveled around all over the conference doing suicide prevention seminars, mainly in person. I've done some on Zoom. I'm back to doing one in person here in town in November. And it's something that I think youth directors and pastors and parents and grandparents and anybody that wants to come and listen needs to come to, because if we haven't experienced it in our homes, in our churches, in our youth groups, our youth are. And, you know, I tell youth directors all the time, this job is not just parties and pizzas. I have gotten texts late at night of a girl that's just taken a bottle of pills. I have gotten text of somebody that says, my best friend just died by their own hand. And we have to be prepared for that, to get it. And my point is to say, to get in front of it, not react to it. So that's the discussions that we have. Then during COVID, I stumbled over, literally because I had all this more time that I was talking about, I stumbled over a group called Springtide Research Institute, and they had a book that I bought and I read, and I went to their webinar, and they said, this was probably a quarter of the way through the first year of COVID. They said that 15 to 25-year-olds that they polled had heard, 1% of them, 1% had heard from somebody in a church setting to check on them during COVID. That's frightening. Their coaches were reaching out to them, of course, their parents and their family and their teachers, but their people, their church people, were not reaching out to them. So when I read that statistic, I wondered how true it was across the board. So again, we halted what we were doing. I bought the rights to the slides of that webinar, and I had my own with the youth directors and said, are we reaching out? This is what they need to hear from us. They need that. And so in a reaction to that, I started a Zoom for my home church that was just young adults that young adults that had gone to my church or my ministry. I mean, I know Grace came a couple of times, Paul's daughter. It was opened up, and lightning strike me, but we allowed them to bring a cocktail because I thought these were young adults. When you open that up to let's just sit down with a glass of wine or a beer, and we're going to talk about how this is right now. And you wouldn't believe how many came. And when I say they came, I mean, not just normal young adults that I knew. There were some young adults that showed up that I had not seen since they were confirmed in the 8th grade. Something about my name, and this is not me tooting my horn, something about somebody connecting with them from their church made them want to show up. Now, agreed, they had time, they weren't going anywhere, but we did this week after week after week, and those same young adults that I hadn't seen in years would pop up every week. And one of them went on a mission trip with me this past summer, because now we've incorporated young adult mission trips too, because to stay connected with young adults after they graduate. So the thing about this Springtide Institute that I just told you, I found that book right before I joined our Zoom. I got an email. They have another book out, and this book is called, let me find, I wrote down the name, Generation Z is Keeping the Faith. Just don't expect to see it at church. That's interesting. So again, I'm all of a sudden going, I think I need to know about this. I think I need to read this book. And one of the things it states in that is that these young adults will trust in they don't trust in religious institutes, but they do trust in the religious people that they still have. That's where we come in. If they're not going to go to church, but if they still can connect to the people that have played that role, it's so important that we continue to do that. So chances are I'm going to buy this book, and I'm probably going to try to hold some sort of webinar or discussion to make sure we still realize they need us. And even if we're just people outside of the church, we've had to rethink things through this. And church is not, again, be careful how I say this. Church is not the be all end all when we're still closed out of places, but the people that they're involved with are, and that's where youth ministry is so important. We also talked about, here's something to consider. We also talked about back still with young adults, is on Christmas and Easter. If you're a young adult and you don't come to church any other time, but your parents make you go to church on Christmas and Easter, I have heard from them that they're a little intimidated. What if the pastor or their youth director or their confirmation teacher or their Sunday school teacher says, "Where have you been?" They don't want to answer that. They don't want to be ridiculed. So what we decided to do at like my home church is we stationed people that were there, that worked with youth at the time. And then we stationed them as ushers. And then we talk about our dialogue. We say things like, "Oh my goodness, you look so nice today. We've missed you. I'm so glad to see you here." Or maybe not even that we missed you. Not anything to make it look like we're condemning them for not coming, because that's why they don't want to come. They hide behind their parents, even as these tall people. And most importantly, try so hard to recognize them, even if you don't remember their name. But then that's the connection they need, not some strange, stuffed guy in a suit holding out the bulletin. Let them see your face. Let them see that you're not mad they haven't been, but you're so glad that they're back. And then they're not as scared to come back anymore. So just some brainstorming in these sessions that we come up with on how to help with that. I also joined a group called AUSSIE, which is across the whole United States, and that stands for Association of United Church Educators. And we just meet on occasion to talk about all of this same stuff. How are we educating our youth? What are we doing? And the changes of the times. And more recently, I became a part of their board of directors, which I'm not really 100% sure what I do on that yet, except for I know that I am let me look at my fancy little title. I'm the representative of the Central Region, which is a bunch of states. And this has nothing to do with my job for the conference. And I've talked to my new boss, Mary Nelson, and we still felt like it was important for me to do this because I believe what I'm supposed to be doing. I've only been doing this for I think 2 weeks. building community with Christian educators in all of those states, no matter what your denomination is, and then talk about these kind of things. Maybe have retreats at some point, or Zoom meetings, things like that. So I'm kind of playing around with that and figuring out what that's going to look like. Then I'm so excited because Zane, I don't know if you're going to any of these. I'm probably not, but maybe, I shouldn't say that. I'm going to 2 back-to-back retreats this fall. I'm going to the one in Montreal Conference Center in North Carolina. It is like a Monday afternoon through Friday morning. And then 2 hours away, I'm going to Blowing Rock, which is an OMA, Outdoor Ministry Association meeting. And I mean, to tell you how excited I am to go back outside. And the Montreal Retreat is run by Presbyterians who are having keynote speakers and so many activities and sessions on post-COVID youth ministry. What is it going to look like? I have no idea what they're going to talk about, but I think it's going to be so incredibly profound. And then the OMA meeting is really talking about outdoor ministries. And the truth is, I have a teeny tiny, oh, you can't make it, dang it. I've heard Montreal's beautiful. My job has a teeny tiny budget. Like if I go out into the conference and I want to hold a suicide prevention seminar, I have to charge people. I don't have a budget to buy coffee or donuts or cookies. So it's always been like that. But what really impressed me was when I talked about this retreat. It's not cheap. I have to fly there. But it was so important that I go on behalf of the Missouri Mid-South, that there was about 5 churches that got together and said, we will pay for you to go. We will do that. So I ended up putting it on my own charge card, and they're all putting the money into the conference. So it works out. And I'm grateful that they realize the role that I'm trying to play in the conference and the importance of this retreat, and that they're benefiting from me to go, because again, I just don't have carry a budget for that. Oh, I guess I should say, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. My job started full time back 3 years ago. But as COVID happened and I didn't get to travel, and I found myself in my office looking up resources more, it was kind of more my idea. But at the time, my boss was Jenny Brown Daniel, and we talked about it. And I went to part-time, and just to kind of be more safe with conference funds, because everybody's hurting. So part-time works for me, it works for the conference. And so that was just kind of a casualty of it. But luckily I'm in a position that it just gives me more time to do other things that I love. So it's okay. So now I'll get to the youth events that Paul alluded to, some of them. But I want to start by saying that if there's any of these that you guys feel like we could combine, you are always welcome to come and join us. We've talked for years about what would it look like if our CYE, our conference youth event, brought Disciples of Christ and United Church of Christ youth together. I'll tell you a quick story about camp. And again, Zane, I'm preaching to the choir when I tell you this, but my son is now 24, and he met and I'm in St. Charles, Missouri. He met some friends in Kansas City. And when they turned 17, and their dad is Michael Stevens of Southwood UCC, and when they turned 17, their dad said, what do you want for your birthday? And they said, we want to go to St. Charles and hang out with the kids we know from camp. So the dad took the weekend off of preaching. They came to St. Charles. They got a hotel. They took all the kids from my church bowling and get pizza, and they're in each other's weddings at this age. And to watch these relationships grow outside of us is so rewarding. That they just had a big baseball game a month ago, Paul. Tons of kids, all from camp, and I wasn't invited. Buzzkill, but I wanted to go. I brought you together, but they all planned it. And for me to stand back, I'm like the mom going, look at my kids. They don't need me. They're all together. That's what youth ministry does outside of just a church, because some churches have 2 or 3 people. Others have larger groups. To combine them, to let them see that there are ways to preach and practice and be together outside of that is fantastic. So with that, I invite you to do anything. But the first thing we have is called our conference middle school event. It used to be a weekend. It was a Friday through a Saturday, and then the Friday night through Saturday afternoon. And then the Western Association had to travel so far. They asked us to extend it to the full weekend. So we did that. We did that once, and then COVID hit, and then we didn't have it last year. So this year we're having it online. And it's going to be virtual. I'm not happy about that, but it's the best we can do for right now. It's on November 21st. It starts at 1 o'clock because we thought that's a Sunday. So maybe if you're having church, you could keep your youth and then set up one Zoom. And here's what I love and don't love. I'm not a gamer all the time. Like, I loved what we did here, but I really, with high schoolers, I want to sit down, even middle schoolers, and ask really deep questions and see where they are, and take them to places in their faith. And I'll play a game and I'll eat the pizza, but I love that. But I was in a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and they said, throw the discussion out for a while, because these youth are heavy with COVID, with politics, with Black Lives Matter, with all of the heavy stuff. Get in school, wear a mask, don't wear a mask. COVID, am I infected? Do I have to not touch you? Can I not sit by you? Let them play. And I sat there in this meeting going, I don't like this at all. But as they talked about it, it makes total sense to me. We could be their safe place. Let them play. Let them be. And if they want to talk about it, open the door for that. But don't require that, because we may lose them out of, I don't want to talk about it, not another minute of another day. Let's play. So that's what this day is going to be. It's just going to be like minute to win it games and things. And I'm not sure how long it's going to last. I don't have a flyer yet, but if you're interested, I'll send it. Paul, I think you'll get it anyway. So do with it. If you want to share it, that would be great. Then we have our conference youth event, which is one of my favorite things to do. It's where I first got my feet wet after confirmation retreats, was in this event. And it's always on President's Day weekend. And they come on Saturday morning, and they say stay through lunch, up to lunch on Monday. And what cracks me up is these high schoolers have been together since Saturday, and they still want to go to Dairy Queen for lunch on their way out of town because they need just a little while longer. And so us exhausted leaders drive them there, and we sit in the corner with our Blizzard and love it, because they just need just a little while longer. So again, we'd love you to join us if you've got high schoolers that ever want to come. I'm hoping that's in person this year. I'm really hoping that works. If it doesn't work out at Moval, we're looking for another camp to hold it. We want to have it. I won't try it online. High schoolers are done with that. I probably will not attempt that via a Zoom. But again, please come. I may be the keynote, because I don't even think I'm going to go out and try to find somebody, because it's too iffy. So they just may get me and Skit Guys videos, which is what I love to do. If you've never looked at them, go look them up. Then summer camps, they're still pending, and my passion is high school. I have directed high school camp for 7 years, and I could cry. I love it. I love it. I love it. The last time I taught high school, or I directed the camp, was obviously the summer before COVID, and we called it the unscripted camp, because nothing good came out of anything that I planned. It was fine. It was fine. It was those unscripted moments when we stepped back and allowed them to make the magic. The unscripted moments were what made you realize that there's something so much bigger that takes place there than what I worked so hard to put together. It all comes together in a talent show where this really awkward freshman boy got up and sang a show tune. And I was afraid they were going to make fun of him, because he was dancing and kicking, and they jumped to their feet. They applauded for him, and he stood there in the glory of that, and something beautiful happened. Unscripted. So that's camp, and we need to get back to camp. So yes, if Moval's closed, Zane, I'm calling you, because I got to come back outside. I need to be back. So with all of that, what I consider to be the most important role that I do in this is build relationships. And that's relationships between the churches and the conference. The churches need to trust the conference. They need to know that I'm here. It's funny, after 3 years, how some churches still don't know that I have this position and can help them. And that they don't have to do all of this work by themselves, that's my job. Call me with a question and I will do my best to answer. So that building that relationship was first and foremost. Then taking churches in small areas and introducing themselves to each other and go, it doesn't look bad if you mix youth groups together. That doesn't mean you're not doing it right or they're doing it better. Make your youth groups bigger and put down the pride. And so that community building. Then between all of the youth leaders to look that, oh, I have that problem too. And how did you handle it? And not be afraid to show your problems within your ministry. None of us have this perfect. And then between me and the youth, I take that so incredibly serious to not only let them know that I'm for them as middle schoolers and as high schoolers, but as I've talked about it again and again, as young adults, because as they're growing, they need somebody. And pastors come and go, youth directors come and go, I'm going to come and go. But young adults don't have that safe church policy. High schoolers, I can't reach out to them. There's boundaries. But young adults, they have to know that we didn't leave. Like I used to love senior celebrations where you would send them off. And then I started not liking them at all. What do you mean sending them off? Sending them where? Go to college, but come back. Don't send them off, celebrate them. And then one final thing, this is kind of this is an off thing, but I'm just going to brag about my pastor, because and this may aggravate you and I don't want it to, but I went to her about a year ago, because a young adult that I have known for many, many years, most of his life, is getting married in Springfield. And he asked me to marry them, and I am not ordained. And he said, if you don't, I will go back to the preacher that used to be at my church who left, which let's not talk about the rules that breaks, but he didn't feel connected to this senior pastor we have now, because there's a big chunk of young adults that young adults that were confirmed together that left and then really didn't give this new pastor, although she's been there like 7 years, a shot. So bear with me, my story will make sense. So I decided that I would talk to my pastor and ask her if this really offended her at all, if I would be ordained, because there was going to be this group of youth that were going to grow up and they were going to want to get married. And I'm the only connection they have at that church, just me. They don't feel that with her. So if we want to keep them, especially in this trying time, if I could be ordained and she could still be a part of the worship, so that the ceremony, so that they see that she's the church, I'm just their connection there, that they will stay and hopefully get married there and raise their families there. And she didn't blink an eye. We did border off what it would be, like it can't be under a certain age once she showed up there, and then most of the other ones are married. So that's just another kind of role I took within the church. And then to make me feel better, she explained that, used to be in the olden days, you would get married by a justice of the peace, and then you'd go to the church for the thing. So it wasn't always underneath the pastor, because I felt like I was insulting people by doing that. But so that's just kind of an extra little role. Again, thinking outside of the box on how to connect people and not following all of these strict rules of this is the way that it has to be, because nothing is as it should be. So we're just rolling with things. So I've talked a lot. I've talked super fast. But again, I'm passionate about it. So if you have any questions for me, please let me know.
Sure. If you all want to come back with your faces, if you will, yeah, let's talk about and bounce off ideas. And real quickly, while everyone is thinking of their great follow-up questions, just to share some dates that I'm aware of too, Cindy, for collaboration and I'm not sure if this is replacing Disciple Summer Mission in the summer, but it's brand new anyway. Its package is brand new. It's called Blue Whale, and it's
Oh,
mission trips on the beach. So
really?
look for that. It's from Disciples Home Missions, and there's two options, one in Florida and one in Texas.
Okay,
So they'll be doing mission work, but on the beach.
that
And or at
sounds
least have time
fantastic.
on the beach too, probably in the communities where the churches are. And then also I mentioned about the pastor's class, First Rites of Passage, I think we're talking about. But anyway, it's out at Shannondale, which is UCC mission camp, on June 3, 4, and 5. So it's and that's for boys. We're gonna have a separate one for the girls, but confirmation age and pastor age youth, and guessing anywhere, it could be from 5th to 8th grade, maybe. That's a little wide gap. And for the boys' case, their dad or a male elder to come, and it's all going to be spiritual immersion, no Bible content or famous theologians or disciples history. That time we're going to have storytelling from Native American traditions, because that's where tribes gathered at Blue Spring and Round Spring down there, and then some folklore and Civil War stories, and then time in the wilderness for meditative sits. So girls may be the same weekend. That's a separate leadership team doing that. So one for boys and one for girls. Would love to have, since it's especially at UCC facility, have any confirmation age boy and girl to participate. And I can give you the names of the women leaders too, Teresa Spear and Carol Hughes. And Ron Rutledge and I are doing the boys. And so those two are settled along with our camps that Zane can talk about if he wants. I know we have canoe camp already. The date is already slated, and it was so popular. I think we're going to have two, one for middle school and one for high school this year down at Shannondale. So William Brown, Caitlin knows it's her lead pastor there is going to direct those, but I think we may need another director, float trip director for the middle school, I think too. But anyway, all sorts of intersection opportunities there. So that's kind of my advertisements and things coming up. But yeah, so many wonderful things that you presented, and so many topics to wrap our head around. Yeah, Zane, what do you have?
Well, do you know if you are still doing, are you guys still doing the Aiders camp? I was supposed to do that with Nick a couple of years ago, but is he a
Right, is that what
DOC?
you're
I
going to
saw he
talk
got a new
about,
job.
Zane?
Okay.
Okay, so whoa, I lost you there for a second. Yes, they're not calling it Aiders, it's Our Bodies, Our Faith.
I knew that.
And so
That's
they're
right.
going to be working through that, and they're getting those dates are kind of I think Nick is still wanting to work with that. Sarah's still to some degree wanting to work with that. I think the question is, where is it going to be? And kind of working through that. So those are the big questions.
I think they honestly want to have it at Moval, if Moval's open, but they had an excellent experience at Shannondale. So they're happy to go back to Shannondale. So it'll be one or the other place, but certainly UCC. And yes, definitely reach out to Nick, who's now the pastor at First Christian in Boonville. But you can get a hold of me. I'll put you in contact with him or Sarah at First in Jeff City. And we'd love to have a co-director who's UCC. So it's not, all of these, it's not, come be our stepchild or stepdaughter, stepbrother, that type of, but full leadership, so everyone is comfortable.
Right. So Cindy, I've got a couple of different comments, and I'll try to get them in time wise. One of them came to what you were talking about with the ability to play. One of the things that we had happen this year that I haven't had happen in a long time is that our CYF camp, if they weren't active, they weren't talking. And if they were, and it was like a super competitive age group. I mean, like stuff that should have been like junior elementary camp type stuff, where the boys have to get to the morning watch space first, and we're out there watching for stuff like that. And it was interesting in watching it. And I think part of what you're talking about is right, is that we've been so bogged down that even before COVID, we were so bogged down between, even in the summer, especially, like you never had, everything was bam, 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 from whether it was summer school or summer sports or art classes or theater groups or whatever. There was never the time just to, in the middle of that. And I think part of why what you're pointing out with camp, even having those retreats of having that one day more, is because I don't have to be on the spot, and there is no pressure to do anything. I don't have to produce anything. I don't have to get the best grade in the class for my scholarships, and I'm worrying about that as a freshman when I shouldn't even have to worry about that, or junior high. We've seen that too, that we're working on that. Or I don't have to be, it's not travel team related, so I get a spot to play. It's not, we just are. And I think the more places that we create that opportunity, and it can be through discussion, and it can be through play and other things, but allowing that time to just let them simply be, I think as we move, whatever we do, as we move out of COVID, as we move, I will never use the word normal. I will say familiar. While we're doing that, as we move into something more and more familiar, I think that's going to have to be something we're really going to have to look at, because even you nailed it on the head by not doing Zoom meetings with high school. They're done. Junior high's done by doing that, especially if they're doing this with school and this and that. It's done. So finding those places where they can just come in and they can just play and be, and there's nothing really, it's not that you don't want to give them any responsibility, but there's also nothing required of them either, other than just to simply be there. If they want to help out, they can, but they don't have to. And they don't have, and they're not getting a lot of opportunities like that right now. So I think, especially as we move into high school and junior high end, I think the more our church creates those environments and those places, I think that's going to become more and more important. So I'll just throw that out as a comment and get these really quick. And then the other comment that I wanted to hear you say was with your college group. I think that one of the problems with mainline denominations, period, is that we are so heady in our thoughts and so mission driven that we don't know how to explain why we're doing what we're doing. So we don't have the scriptural backing in our junior high and our high school, or it's there, but we don't. We need to learn from our evangelical brothers and sisters who, when they do something, they can go, here it is. And they can go the biblical response, why? And so I think being able to have that biblical knowledge of, why am I doing this? Why is justice so important? And having the biblical knowledge to be able to say it, not just because it's what God wants you to do, but then also having the biblical knowledge when they go into those conversations in college, where most of the the college programming is so heavy from the evangelical circles to not know how to say it and how to fit in. And so I just kind of exclude back. I think we have to do that more with our,
exactly right. Yeah.
With our junior high and our high school and even our elementary, to start doing it. It has to be more than just, while it is important and while it is true, it has to be more than God loves you and that's why we're here and we're hitting some of these key stories. I think we have to do some exegetical work with our people and let them be able to start figuring out, this is what a gospel is, this is what a letter is, this is what these things are, so that they have that knowledge, so that they don't feel intimidated when they get challenged, because their faith view is different. But we're so worried about entertaining, and so it goes counter to what I was saying earlier, but we're so worried about making sure that we have the programming right, and that we have the mission trip planned right, and that we're doing all the right things. We don't have the why, scriptural why behind why we're doing the activities. And I think that's going to become more and more important as we're seeing within mainline churches and evangelical churches with our young people going away. Sometimes I think it's because we haven't really hit the why we do what we do as much as it is we just say, well, this is important, so we're going to go do it. But why?
It's kind of like being a parent going, it's because I said so.
Right.
We kind of do that same thing in youth ministries because God wants us to be like this. But why? Why?
This is how you love your neighbor, but why? But why? And we never really get into that, and we never really dig into it. One, because we don't have time, and two, we don't have that. But to really start acknowledging that younger and going, we've got to build this, because it is what our evangelical brothers and sisters do when they start young and go, man, to know this. And I know it's different than saying we don't want to mirror it, but there's some things there that we got to pay attention to.
Exactly.
All right, I got one last question for you. It's a practicality one, and COVID and Zoom are kind of making all of this kind of mute, but we had in-person camp. And we've always had rules with what cell phone usage is. So I'd like for you to talk a little bit about what you all do with that. But the big thing that we started noticing this year within our high school group of having a watch out for were watches, even though I'm not wearing one. Smart watches, because I can still text and I can still Snapchat and I can still do that. And even though we didn't have that with it, we had phones in there. We didn't say anything about our watch. And within our high school group, our rule is, as long as it is a tool, we don't mind you using it. If it is a distraction, we're going to start making rules with that. So if you're using it to look up scripture, or you're using it to look up music, or you're using it to draw people together, fine. Like if I'm trying to keep my Snapchat streak up and running again, or TikTok video, or whatever else I'm trying to do, no. And that becomes, so it really is letting them start to define, this is the reality of how we work and what we do with it. Because you get into, it is almost, if we had kids coming in with juuling, we'd figure out ways to help them out instead of just taking the juuling away. Whether, do I need to buy you nicotine gum? What do I need to do to get you through the week? It's true, because we've had that. We've had it with cigarettes. Taking away the phone and not having any way to wean it off is just as strong of an addiction when they're on, for all of this. If we're on this all the time, I don't know how to function without this, and all of a sudden we go, it's gone. Well,
I will tell you what we do for
wean?
high school camp.
Yeah.
And but again, that's the only one I've directed. I don't think middle school is a big of a deal. But what we do is, and I will say in the beginning, we get backlash, but I meet them at the door with a crate of Ziploc bags, and I take it. I take their phone, I take their Apple Watch, and I put their name on the bag. And what I learned after the first year is to make them power it off, because the first night of the first time, everybody's alarm went off, and I had them all in a crate, and it's three, and then, high school girls who don't know how to use snooze have a 5:15, 5:30, 5:45. I woke up the next day, I was so tired. But in the beginning, the parents are even like, well, what if they need to call home? And I just go, they won't.
Right.
We make them so tired. And what if they need it for music? I'll sing. But in the beginning, they hated it. I always had my phone. Their leader always had their phone. If they needed to look up scripture, use my phone. If they needed a song for a worship they were putting together, I'll give you everybody knew the code to my phone. I didn't care.
We did all that. We did all that, and we had kids bringing old phones and turning those in.
Well, if they were caught with it, that was in our covenant. But here was the thing: we might have found a couple, or they bragged about it at the end. I kept my phone the whole time, and Cindy never caught me. Yay! But I would confront them, and I would talk. I really had relationships. When I start back in camp, I got to start all over because I don't know these kids that well. But I will tell
you that if you go back to live person next year, you are going to realize how much you forgot. Because
I believe that.
Because that's what we ran into this year of going, I didn't even think about that. And that's something that we always do. So just prepare for that.
We stumbled over.
You're going to
it's a whole other thing to talk. We've already had a transgender person come to camp once. We had a boy bring his boyfriend. So those are the things we go, what do you do in that sense? But anyway, But with the phones, what we found out was by the end of the week, we always have a dance on Friday.
Right.
So we would let them have their phones. We would even plug them in to make sure they were charged.
Right.
So that they would have their phones to take pictures. But then we would find in 10 minutes, they'd come back and go, I don't really want it. And then I would take pictures of them, and then they would all go through my phone if they wanted, send it to themselves. And I heard time and and time again, they weren't mad anymore, that they loved, they did not know what life was like without the phone and community. So after the first summer or two, they were completely okay. They'd already have it in and all wrapped up and hand it to us. And it grew. But yes, we always had the ones. I don't know if they wanted their phone as much as they wanted to trick me.
I will tell you the other end of that, though, and you said it, is that what we're seeing now with the younger kids, and this is for your camping communities, the amount of parents who are even more uneasy about sending their kids away, because we got to looking at everything that kids do, parents go with them. If it is a travel team, they're with them. They're in the hotel. They go with them everywhere, and there is more and more hesitation of a week away, 3 days away, of whatever, of not having the kids. We're seeing that big time right now, and I think that's part of what we're not having feed into our older ones, is because it's not the kids you aren't ready to go; it's parents.
You're right. You're very right. Yes.
They had school at home too. So.
They had school at home. They had, I mean, all these things. It was always right there. So that's going to be more things that, as we start working in, that we're really going to have to go back and readdress. We can't just sell it on the idea of you want your kids to have a camp experience, because maybe I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I want them to have the experience of I want to be, or I want to have it with them.
That's right.
And so that's the other piece of it.
All right.
You're right. You're right.
10 or 15 minutes more of discussion time, and then we'll do wrap up according to our schedule. But who else?
And I am going to let you go, so I've got to help out some things at the house. So thank you all. Thank you, Cindy, for everything you brought in.
Nice to meet you, Zane.
Yep.
Thank you, Zane.
Yep.
I'm also out. I thought we were done at 8. I'm sorry. Thank you for your time, Cindy. This has been great. Paul, thanks for pulling this together. Blessings on all of you.
Sure thing.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you, Alyssa.
Bye.
It's before we lose too many. Did have one practical question, but I guess it's an important question. I know your covenanted youth ministry meets on a Thursday morning at 10, I think it is, or 10 or 11, 10:30. Do you find that even though there's some youth leaders who are volunteer and have day jobs, but pastors are, zoned out at night too, because they did ministry all day long? Have you found the sweet spot for gathering youth leaders? Is it during the day or evening?
No, we tried that a couple of times, and maybe we want to try it again, but we tried offering it at nighttime, and it was the same people that came during the day that came at night. And so, yeah, no, it didn't work. So we probably did that 3 or 4 times, and then we just saw it was the same one. So we just kept it at our day that worked the best for us. And we would always send out the minutes for that. I mean, on our youth covenanted team, I think we send out emails to about 75 people, and maybe 5 to 8 come to the meetings, but they're the main ones that is their full-time job or their main job. So we get a lot accomplished. And like my newsletter, I send out my newsletter to like 104 people. And so that's a lot of, and those are people that have asked for it, not like me go out and looking for them. So that's really kind of cool too. But the funny, it's like going into a black hole. You have no idea what they're taking from it until like someday I might be in a meeting like this and somebody go, oh my gosh, I love that one book you suggested. And I wanted to go, could you just tell me that so I know that you're getting something out of what I'm sending? But yeah, but no, we didn't find a spot. We just.
Well, everyone, thank you so much. And if you could hang on for 5 minutes, David Nordyke, who would have joined us, but his kids have baseball or something tonight, produced a little 5-minute devotional for us, and that'll close us out. But we'll say goodbye now before we move over there. Thank you so much, Cindy, and
You're very
Caitlin
welcome.
and Eileen and
I've
Sarah
enjoyed this.
for
Thank
joining
you.
us there. So I will share, and then let this be your blessing for your good night. Oops. Actually, sorry, that's tomorrow's video or Saturday's video. Let me find the one that I intended. So Sorry about that. It worked on my screen. There it is. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to David in advance. For some reason, it's not sharing, even though it was wonderful. So I'll figure out a way to share it still another time. So, but thank you, everyone, this evening, and blessings to everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.